What if every single photo you took disappeared into thin air, not corrupted, not deleted, just gone, as though it had never existed? For one young woman in Lagos, this nightmare was her everyday reality. Until one night, at a dazzling billionaire's party, she captured an image that refused to fade, an image of herself, standing beside a man whispered about in hushed tones, a billionaire no one could keep in a photograph. And from that single frame, her life was pulled into a world of glamour, secrets, betrayal, and a love story that defied memory itself. Lagos never truly slept. Its streets pulsed with restless energy even in the middle of the night, honking Danfo buses, late-night suya sellers, fanning glowing coals, and the constant murmur of a city unwilling to rest. But inside a cramped one-room apartment in Surulere, a young woman sat hunched over her camera, eyes wide with disbelief. Chiamaka's fingers trembled as she flipped through the small screen, her heart racing. She had spent the whole day roaming the streets with her Nikon, capturing everything that caught her eye. An old woman frying akara, children chasing a deflated ball in the dust, the chaos of Balogan Market where fabric colors spilled like rainbows. But now, as midnight settled, the photos were gone. One by one, they had simply vanished, leaving behind a hollow emptiness. She pressed the buttons furiously, scrolling. Nothing. Not a single shot remained. Her chest tightened as though her art, her very soul, had been stolen. It wasn't the first time. It happened every day. At first, she thought it was a technical fault. She saved money, took the camera to Computer Village, and begged a technician to fix it. He assured her the device was fine. But the problem wasn't the camera. It was something far stranger. Everything she captured, food, buildings, people, faded as if Lagos itself was rejecting her attempt to hold it still. By the next morning, the memory card would always be empty. Her friends had laughed cruelly. "Maybe your ancestors don't want you snapping pictures. You're cursed." Her family had been less amused. "Chiamaka, photography won't feed you. Look around. Does anyone in this family eat from chasing shadows?" But Chiamaka couldn't give up. To her, photography was more than pictures. It was proof she existed in a city too big, too harsh, too fast to remember anyone. The camera was her escape from poverty, from ridicule, from the ache of abandonment left by a father who walked out years ago. Without it, she felt invisible. Still, night after night, the vanishing mocked her, until one evening when fate shifted, she was invited, through a friend of a friend, to cover a high-profile fashion gala on Victoria Island. Chiamaka had never stepped into such a world before. The venue sparkled with chandeliers, designer gowns shimmered like constellations, and billionaires toasted champagne under the glow of neon lights. She felt like an imposter, clutching her camera in a hall dripping with gold. Yet once she began snapping, instinct took over. She clicked away, models strutting down runways, businessmen whispering deals in corners, celebrities laughing under flashes. Dozens of pictures filled her screen, vibrant and alive. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope. But by dawn, when she checked again, her hope crumbled. Every picture was gone, every last one, except one. Her breath caught as she stared at the surviving image. It wasn't a model or a star. It wasn't even the runway. It was her. In the corner of the photo, blurred yet undeniable, stood Chiamaka, and beside her, towering, magnetic, a faint smile curving his lips, was a man she didn't know but instantly recognized from whispers and magazine covers. Obinna Ifeanyi, a billionaire, a tech mogul. The kind of man who appeared on Forbes lists and owned half of Lagos Island's skyline. The strangest part? His image remained. The photo refused to disappear. Chiamaka tested it. She deleted it. It returned. She reformatted her camera. It reappeared. She even transferred it to a friend's phone. The picture endured, crisp and haunting, as though protected by a power stronger than deletion. Her skin prickled with goosebumps. Why this photo? Why him? She zoomed into his face on the screen. His eyes seemed to glimmer unnaturally, as though staring back at her through the lens, even now. The smile was faint, almost unreadable. Half invitation, half warning. Sleep abandoned her. She lay awake all night, heart racing, unable to look away from the image. She felt a strange pull, as if the photo itself was alive, as if this man, this billionaire stranger, had chosen her. By the next morning, exhaustion dragged her into uneasy sleep. The city outside roared to life, hawkers shouting, keiki horns blaring, but she drifted, clutching her camera to her chest. When she finally woke, sunlight spilling across her narrow room, her eyes fell on something that froze her blood. Her small wooden desk, cluttered with books and wrappers, now bore a sheet of glossy photo paper. The surviving image, printed, perfectly developed. She never owned a printer. She never sent it to anyone. Yet there it lay, as though delivered by invisible hands, the billionaire's face clearer, his eyes sharper, his smile deeper. And in that instant, Chiamaka understood. Her life had just crossed into a mystery far larger than she could imagine. By the time the sun set over Lagos the next day, Chiamaka could no longer sit still. The strange, unexplainable photo had taken over her thoughts like a fever. She needed answers. Her small laptop hummed on her wobbly desk as she searched endlessly for information about the man in the picture. His name appeared everywhere, but never his face. Obinna Ifeanyi. He was no ordinary billionaire. He was Nigeria's youngest self-made magnate, the visionary behind Innovatech, a company that had transformed African fintech and led ambitious projects in AI-driven banking systems, renewable energy grids, and even Lagos's new Smart City initiative that powered traffic lights, surveillance, and data infrastructure. His wealth was a kingdom, his influence untouchable. But there was something eerie that articles never explained. There were interviews, yes. There were reports of him giving keynote speeches at international summits, yes. But the visuals, always absent. The photos attached to news stories were old, decades old, faded shots of him as a much younger man. Nothing recent. Not one image of him at the glamorous parties he supposedly hosted. Not a single verifiable picture of him at award ceremonies or ribbon cuttings. She dived into online forums and gossip blogs, and that was when the unsettling whispers began to surface. My camera froze when I tried to shoot him. Every photo I ever took of him disappeared by the next morning. Some say he doesn't appear in mirrors either. He had earned a nickname in secret online circles. The man the lens refuses. The deeper Chiamaka dug, the colder her room seemed to become. She wrapped herself in her scarf, shivering not from the harmattan breeze but from the weight of what she was uncovering. She closed her laptop and stared again at the photo lying on her desk. Her photo, her miracle, or her curse. The billionaire in that surviving picture was not blurry, not distorted, not erased. He was there, undeniably there, standing beside her as if they belonged in the same frame. Why? The question gnawed at her until obsession began to grow. She wasn't sure if she was afraid of him or drawn to him. The photo had made him more than a man in her eyes. He was becoming a myth, a puzzle wrapped in wealth, power, and shadows. Her days turned restless. She carried the photo everywhere, tucked carefully in her camera bag. At night she dreamt of him, not as a stranger, but as someone who kept watching her, always with that faint, unreadable smile. And then, one weekend, she showcased her work at a small rooftop photography exhibition in Yaba. It was meant to be her chance to prove herself, to finally be recognized as a real artist. She displayed her city shots, her fleeting moments of Lagos life, though she feared they would disappear, like always. But this time, they didn't vanish immediately. Perhaps because she had printed them, bright prints lined the rooftop stands, each one a glimpse of the city she loved. The crowd was small but curious, young creatives, wealthy patrons looking for art to decorate their homes, students with hungry eyes. Then toward the end of the evening a man approached her stand quietly. She never saw his face clearly. He wore a cap pulled low and sunglasses even though the night was creeping in. He bought everything, every last photograph. His assistant handed her an envelope stuffed with naira notes far beyond anything she had ever earned. But when Chiamaka looked back at her display, she froze. One photo remained, the billionaire photo. It hadn't been purchased. It hadn't even been touched. It just sat there, as though the anonymous buyer had deliberately left it behind. Her chest tightened. She reached for her bag to pack up, and that was when her fingers brushed against something that shouldn't have been there. An envelope, smooth, cream-colored, with no name written on it. She looked around frantically, but the man and his assistant were gone. Hands trembling, she tore it open. Inside was a small card, elegant and wordless, except for a single line embossed in dark gold ink. If you want answers, come to Echo Atlantic tonight. Her breath caught. Echo Atlantic, Lagos's gleaming city rising out of the ocean, a haven of skyscrapers and billion-dollar towers. It was where the richest hid from the chaos of the mainland, where glass reflected the sea and security gates kept out the world. She clutched the card, torn between fear and a strange, intoxicating thrill. Answers, finally, answers. But at what cost? Her eyes shifted back to the billionaire's smile frozen in the photograph. His gaze felt sharper now, more alive than ever. She couldn't tell if it was a warning or an invitation. Night fell over Lagos with its usual restless hum, but Echo Atlantic stood apart, like a separate kingdom built on the ocean. Its skyscrapers glittered with mirrored glass, neon lights rippled across the coastline, and the streets pulsed with silent wealth. Unlike the chaos of the mainland, this city moved in quiet luxury. No hawkers, no honking buses, just polished cars gliding smoothly under the glow of imported street lamps. Chiamaka clutched the invitation card as she crossed into this futuristic world. Her heart pounded, every step reminding her she didn't belong here. Security checkpoints waved her through after scanning the embossed card. And then she was inside, swallowed by towering buildings of glass and chrome, each one taller than the last, until she finally reached the one address that matched the card, Obinna Ifeanyi's penthouse. The building itself was a monument to ambition, rising higher than its neighbors, its walls gleaming like crystal. She stepped into the lobby and felt dwarfed by its emptiness. White marble floors stretched endlessly, robotic assistants glided silently by, and biometric doors blinked with coded light. It was a place designed for efficiency, but stripped of warmth, luxury with no laughter. The elevator opened as if waiting for her. She stepped inside, and without pressing a button, it carried her up in perfect silence. The higher she went, the more Lagos shrank beneath her, until the city was just flickers of orange lights swallowed by the vast, dark ocean. When the doors slid open, she was greeted not by noise, but by silence. A vast penthouse stretched before her, all glass walls and sharp lines. Holographic art shifted across the walls, projecting. Endless landscapes from deserts to snow-capped mountains. Robotic arms poured wine in crystal glasses on a table that looked untouched. The space felt alive, but empty, like a stage awaiting its only actor. And then he appeared. Obinna Ifeanyi. He walked toward her with quiet intensity, every movement controlled, his presence both magnetic and unsettling. He wasn't smiling, but his gaze was piercing, as though he had known her all his life. Chiamaka's breath caught. She clutched her bag tighter. "I know why you're here," he said, his voice deep, deliberate, every word carrying weight. "It's not the photo itself that brought you, it's what it means." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She reached into her bag and pulled out the surviving picture, holding it carefully, like proof of something impossible. Obinna's eyes softened briefly, almost with sorrow, as he looked at it. "It's not a blessing," he said finally, his gaze never leaving hers. "It's an anchor." Her heart skipped. "An anchor?" He nodded slowly, as though the word itself pained him. "Every trace of me vanishes, every image, every record, every attempt to hold me in time, gone. It has been this way for years. People remember my name, they know my empire, but they cannot hold my image. Reality erases me." Chiamaka's skin prickled. The stories, the rumors, the vanishing photos. Suddenly they weren't just whispers, they were truth. "Then why does this one remain?" she whispered. He studied her deeply, his gaze searching her face as though she might hold the answer he himself had been chasing. "That," he said, "is what makes you different." The words lodged in her chest. Different. The curse, or whatever it was, had spared her photograph. Fate had tethered them. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I don't want you to take pictures of me, Chiamaka. I want you to be my chronicler, the only one allowed to capture what the world refuses to keep, my story, my life. Through your eyes, not just in photographs, but in memory, in permanence." The room seemed to close in on her. Chronicler, not just a photographer, something deeper, heavier, more binding. Her instincts screamed to run, but another part of her, the dreamer, the broken girl who wanted to be seen, leaned forward, drawn in by the mystery of him. "What if I say no?" she asked, though her voice wavered. Obinna's expression did not change. "You won't. You came here because you already know this is bigger than you, bigger than both of us." Her heart hammered. She should leave. She should run back to the messy, noisy streets of Surulere where life was at least predictable. But destiny had already placed her here, and turning away felt impossible. Finally she nodded, though her chest felt heavy. "Then I'll do it." For the first time, a faint smile curved his lips, the same smile she had seen in the photo that refused to vanish. "You'll be free to photograph me as you wish," he said. "No one else has ever been permitted that. But know this, once you've begun, there is no way back." His words echoed like a warning she didn't fully understand. Later, as she walked back toward the glass elevator, her hands shook. She wanted to leave, to breathe, to step outside of this surreal place. But when she pressed the button, nothing happened. The doors did not close. The elevator remained frozen. She turned back in confusion, only to see Obinna standing at a distance, watching her. With a simple gesture of his hand, the elevator suddenly whirred back to life. She stepped inside, her pulse racing. It was clear now, she wasn't free. She was already trapped in his world. Chiamaka's new life began not with a bang, but with a series of breathtaking silences. From the moment she accepted Obinna's offer, her world shifted. Days that once began with chasing light in noisy markets now opened in glass towers and private jets. She became his shadow, his chronicler, allowed to document what no one else could keep. The existence of a man who lived in plain sight, yet remained a phantom in memory. She followed him into boardrooms where billion-naira deals unfolded like wars. Suited men argued in voices thick with pride and fear, their words echoing off marble walls. Chiamaka sat at the edge, snapping candid shots that would have vanished for anyone else. But in her lens, Obinna endured, his sharp gaze, his poised hand gestures, the way silence fell when he spoke. She captured him on the decks of yachts where oil tycoons whispered alliances over champagne. The ocean glittered under the sun, and Obinna's figure, calm yet commanding, stood like a sovereign surveying his kingdom. She saw him in his private labs, surrounded by glowing screens and engineers who built technologies that promised to rewrite Nigeria's future. He was the epicenter of power, every step a ripple that reshaped lives, and yet, beneath the glamour, there was a hollowness no camera could disguise. At dinner, she watched him sit at long, gleaming tables where chefs from Tokyo prepared courses with surgical precision. Silverware sparkled, glasses chimed, but Obinna always sat alone. The silence of his mansion unnerved her. A place filled with rare art flown in from Paris, sculptures worth millions, walls alive with holographic displays. Yet it felt like a museum more than a home. Every corner whispered wealth, but none whispered warmth. One evening, as she clicked her shutter while he poured himself a glass of red wine, he caught her gaze and held it. "You see it, don't you?" he asked quietly. "See what?" she replied, lowering her camera. His eyes drifted toward the endless table stretching between them. Admiration everywhere, but no one to sit close, no one to know the man behind the name. The confession surprised her. The man Forbes had crowned, the one newspapers glorified, spoke not with pride, but with loneliness. She hesitated, then found herself answering. "I know something about being unseen." He tilted his head, curious. "My father left when I was 12. My mother still curses the day I picked up a camera. To her, art is foolishness. My family laughs at me. They say photography cannot build a future. Sometimes," she swallowed, "sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing too." A silence settled, heavier than before, but not empty. It was a silence that connected them, two souls bound not by luxury or poverty, but by wounds. From then on, their conversations deepened. He told her of betrayals in business, of nights staring at city lights, wondering if his empire was worth the cost. She shared stories of rejection, of selling her work for pennies just to survive. Their pain became a bridge, and through it all, her photos remained intact. Every shot of him, whether laughing faintly on the yacht, brooding in the lab, or gazing at the horizon from his penthouse balcony, stayed sharp, unyielding. Unlike every other image she had ever taken, these photos defied the curse of vanishing. For Chiamaka, it was more than art. It was proof she wasn't cursed, proof that maybe she was chosen. Their bond thickened, not with the fireworks of sudden romance, but with the slow burn of recognition. She began to see the man beyond the myth, and he began to let her. Yet even as affection bloomed, a shadow lingered, an unspoken fear that this closeness was too fragile, too unnatural. It was during one of Obinna's grand galas, when the elite of Lagos glittered under chandeliers and violins filled the air, that the unease returned. Chiamaka moved through the crowd with her camera, weaving past gowns that sparkled like water and men who smelled of cologne and ambition. She was finally beginning to feel like she belonged at his side. Then from across the hall, a figure approached, tall, elegant, draped in emerald silk that clung to her like second skin. Her walk carried authority, her eyes carried fire. She stopped in front of Chiamaka, smiling with lips that did not reach her eyes. "You must be the new chronicler," she said softly, though her tone cut like a blade. Chiamaka stiffened. "And you are?" The woman's smile widened, predatory. "Ifeoma." She leaned closer, her perfume intoxicating, her words colder than ice. "You think you're the first to capture him? Ask him what happened to the last woman who tried." The music swelled around them, but for Chiamaka, the room froze. The warning lingered like smoke in the air, and with it, a new fear. Perhaps Obinna's loneliness was not an accident. Perhaps every woman who dared to draw near was destined to vanish like his photos. The gala lights flickered like trapped stars across crystal chandeliers, but for Chiamaka, the brightness only deepened the chill settling in her bones. Ifeoma's words clung to her like a curse. Ask him what happened to the last woman who tried. From that moment, the night shifted. The music was still sweet, the laughter still loud, the glasses still clinking, but every sound felt distorted, stretched thin under the weight of suspicion. Ifeoma didn't linger to explain. She drifted through the crowd like she owned it, every gaze turning in her direction as though the room itself obeyed her presence. Chiamaka couldn't ignore the way people whispered when she passed, half awe, half fear. Later, she found herself cornered on a balcony overlooking the neon lights of Echo Atlantic. Ifeoma appeared again, this time without the mask of politeness. "You think he's letting you see his soul?" she asked, her voice low, sharp as glass. "You think because your pictures survive, you're different. I thought so once, too." Chiamaka's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Ifeoma's eyes glistened, not with softness, but with a fury that had aged into elegance. "He destroyed me, piece by piece, my career, my name, my dreams. When I walked into his world, I thought I had found a man of vision, a man who could change Africa. What I didn't realize was that everything he touches eventually disappears." "You're lying," Chiamaka whispered, but even to her own ears the words sounded fragile. Ifeoma leaned closer, her perfume intoxicating. "Tell me, do you really know him? Do you know why the world refuses to hold his image? Do you know how many women before you thought they could anchor him until they faded into nothing?" Her tone was venom, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had truly bled. Chiamaka wanted to believe it was bitterness, a scorned ex grasping for power. Yet the tremor in her voice hinted at a wound that had never healed. Obinna, when confronted, brushed it aside. "She's desperate," he said later in his penthouse, pouring himself whiskey. "She wants relevance, and dragging my name is the fastest way." But he said nothing more. No details, no explanations, only silence. And that silence pressed harder against Chiamaka's heart than any of Ifeoma's accusations. At night, she replayed their conversations in her head. The warmth she had seen in Obinna, the emptiness he had confessed, the way his loneliness mirrored hers. Could all of it be a carefully curated performance? And yet, her photos of him remained, proof he was not just a ghost, proof that somehow she was chosen to hold what the world could not. Still doubt coiled itself around her. The rivalry with Ifeoma grew sharper in the days that followed. At charity dinners, Ifeoma appeared at Obinna's side, smiling too brightly, her hand grazing his arm in ways meant to sting. At business events, she whispered into the ears of his partners, her laughter carrying across the room like daggers meant for Chiamaka's chest. The billionaire world became a battlefield without open war, glances like bullets, whispered warnings like knives, silent sabotage at every turn. Chiamaka began to feel like an intruder at her own post. The glamour that had dazzled her now felt like a hall of mirrors where nothing was true. She told herself she was not afraid, that she would uncover the full truth of this man, no matter how many shadows Ifeoma tried to throw across his image. But the fear crept in anyway. It came one evening when Obinna hosted a private dinner. The night was intimate, the room bathed in soft golden light. Chiamaka stood at the corner, capturing candid moments, determined to freeze his life into frames that would outlast time itself. Obinna laughed faintly at something Ifeoma whispered. His profile caught the light, sharp and almost ethereal. Instinctively, Chiamaka raised her camera and clicked. She lowered it, expecting to see both of them frozen in the stillness of the moment. But her breath stopped. On the screen, Ifeoma stood alone, vivid and intact. Beside her, where Obinna should have been, there was nothing but an empty chair and the faint ghost of light. For the first time, her camera had betrayed her. Obinna was gone. Her pulse pounded in her ears as her grip tightened on the camera. Why? Why did his image vanish now, when before it had always endured? Her eyes darted from the photo to the man still seated in front of her, alive and present. And yet, in the captured memory, he did not exist. Chiamaka's chest tightened with dread. Maybe Ifeoma was right. Maybe the truth about Obinna was darker than she could bear. Obinna Ifeanyi had built an empire so vast that his name alone could sway markets. For years he had seemed untouchable, a titan at the intersection of technology, energy, and real estate. But power has its seasons, and even giants stumble when shadows lengthen. The first cracks appeared quietly. Investors whispered of strange erasures in the company's financial records. Entire transaction histories vanished from digital ledgers overnight, leaving only fragments like half-remembered dreams. Some claimed hackers were to blame, but others, those who had tried to capture Obinna's image and failed, whispered that it was something deeper. Soon, panic spread. International partners froze their accounts. Local investors pulled out, citing unexplained anomalies. Board members began meeting in secret, their loyalty dissolving as quickly as Obinna's digital footprints. For the first time, the man who had commanded Lagos with a whisper was losing control. Chiamaka watched the unraveling from inside his world. She saw him enter boardrooms where respect had once been automatic, only to be met with doubt and sidelong glances. She saw him return home after midnight, shoulders heavy with silence. The light in his eyes dimmed. The tabloids seized the chaos. Headlines screamed, "The Vanishing Tycoon? Is Obinna Ifeanyi's empire an illusion? Billions missing, or never there to begin with?" Pundits debated whether he was a fraud all along. Social media feasted on the story, turning him into a ghost, a cautionary tale of wealth too mysterious to trust. And yet, amid the storm, one truth remained. Chiamaka's photos of him still endured. When the world erased him, her lens preserved him, frame after frame of him in his rawest moments, slumped over papers at 3 a.m., gazing silently out of his penthouse window, his face twisted with doubt during meetings, remained untouched by the curse. One night, As he paced the length of his empty dining hall, Chiamaka dared to ask, "Does it scare you, being erased?" He paused, hand gripping the back of a chair as though it were the only thing keeping him grounded. His voice was low, cracked with exhaustion. "All my life, I have lived in fear of it," he admitted. "Not just losing wealth, not just losing power, but being forgotten, erased from history as if I never existed." The words struck her chest like a bell. For a moment she didn't see a billionaire. She saw a boy abandoned by permanence, a man trapped in brilliance that never left behind proof. Her hand lifted the camera almost instinctively. She clicked, capturing him against the vast emptiness of his mansion. When she glanced at the image, his figure remained clear, unfading, real. He noticed the photo and stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "You're the only one who can hold me. Without you, even I am unsure if I'm real." Their eyes locked, and something shifted. What had begun as curiosity deepened into dependence. She was no longer just his chronicler, she was his anchor. The nights that followed blurred into something both intoxicating and dangerous. She found herself by his side in every moment, documenting him not as the world's billionaire, but as a man whose existence clung to her. He, in turn, leaned into her presence, letting her see parts of him no one else ever had. Their bond became physical, emotional, almost desperate. Affection grew heavy with need. She knew it wasn't a simple romance. It was survival, tethered by a curse neither of them fully understood. But even love could not silence the chaos outside their glass fortress. Obinna's name continued to darken in headlines. His enemies circled like vultures, waiting for the empire to collapse. And still, Chiamaka stayed, believing that the permanence of her photographs meant something, that maybe through her he could defy history's erasure. But fate had other plans. One evening she returned to her small Surulere apartment to find an envelope waiting on her doorstep. There was no address, no name, just a smooth white surface, oddly warm beneath her fingers. Her breath caught as she opened it. Inside was no letter, no explanation, only a single USB drive. Its casing glowed faintly, as though alive, as though it carried something more than data. Chiamaka stood frozen at her door, the city buzzing around her, her heart thundering. Was it a key? A warning? Or a weapon aimed at the man she had begun to love? Chiamaka sat at her small wooden desk, the glowing USB resting in her palm like something alive. It pulsed faintly, its light flickering as though it held a heartbeat. For hours she stared at it, fear wrestling with curiosity. Outside, Lagos blared in its usual chorus of Danfo's honking and generators humming, but inside her room the silence felt suffocating. Finally, she slid the device into her laptop. The screen flickered, then loaded a single hidden folder. Inside, a collection of encrypted files. With trembling fingers, she clicked on the first video. The footage was grainy, as if pulled from forgotten archives. It showed a younger Obinna, no older than 25, standing in front of an unfinished skyscraper. Reporters surrounded him, microphones thrust forward. He spoke with passion about the future of Lagos, about building a city powered by clean energy. But when the video cut to crowd shots, something strange happened. People gestured toward him, spoke his name, but when the camera tried to hold on his figure, it blurred, dissolved, then reappeared faintly, before vanishing again. Chiamaka's skin prickled. She clicked another file. This one showed a ribbon-cutting ceremony for one of his early tech labs. Dignitaries clapped, speeches rang out, and yet when the footage panned toward Obinna, the ribbon cut itself. The scissors hovered, Clapping echoed, but he wasn't there. Another file, a birthday celebration. Guests sang, raising glasses. A cake with his name glowed under candles. People laughed, called to him. But in the playback, he was missing. Only shadows hinted that someone had stood at the center. Her breath quickened as she opened more. Dozens of clips told the same story. Obinna's presence acknowledged by voices, remembered by gestures, but never preserved in light. And then came the interviews. One after another, men and women, former partners, business rivals, old friends, sat in shadowed rooms, speaking into cameras. I worked with Obinna, yes, he was brilliant. I remember shaking his hand, but... The man faltered, brow furrowing. When I checked my phone after, the photo we took was gone. He was real. I know he was. But why can't I find a single picture? Each testimony carried both certainty and confusion, as though memory itself had been tampered with. Chiamaka sat frozen, her heart thudding. It wasn't just rumor. It wasn't coincidence. Someone, or something, was actively erasing him from history. But who? And why? Her fingers hovered before she finally closed the laptop. She knew she had to show him. That evening, in the cold brilliance of his glass penthouse, she placed the USB on Obinna's sleek desk. "You need to see this." He hesitated, then inserted it. As the files played, his expression shifted, not with shock, but with dread, as though he had long expected this moment. When the final clip ended, silence filled the room. "You knew," Chiamaka whispered. Obinna leaned back in his chair, eyes clouded. "I've always known. From the beginning I felt it. Reality resists me. The world cannot keep me. My presence fades, no matter how strong my empire." He rubbed his temples, voice raw. "I build towers, they stand. I change economies, they flourish. But me, I am the shadow in my own story." Chiamaka's throat tightened. She wanted to reach for him, to shake him free of that despair. "You're not gone," she insisted. "You're here, with me. My photos prove it. Maybe..." She swallowed. "Maybe I'm the exception. Maybe I'm the anchor you've been waiting for." For the first time, his eyes softened with something almost like hope. But then she clicked on the last file, and what she saw stole her breath. It was an art gallery exhibition years ago. A series of painted canvases lined white walls. Each one attempted to capture Obinna's likeness. At the center of the exhibit stood a younger Ifeoma, speaking passionately to patrons. Chiamaka leaned forward. On the canvases, Obinna's features were faint, incomplete, faces painted, then smeared into nothing. Guests circled the works, nodding, whispering, admiring what they called the attempt to immortalize a man who vanishes. At the bottom corner of one blurred portrait, a signature curved elegantly. Ifeoma and Chiamaka's pulse roared in her ears. Ifeoma hadn't only been his partner, she had once tried to preserve him through her art, too. She snapped her laptop shut, bile rising in her throat. All this time, she had believed she was unique, chosen by fate to capture what others couldn't. But Ifeoma had stood in her place before. Ifeoma had tried and failed, which meant her survival as Obinna's anchor might not be permanent. And Ifeoma, knowing more of his truth than she ever admitted, might hold the key to why Chiamaka's photographs remained at all. The days that followed the discovery of the USB were unlike anything Chiamaka had ever known. Her relationship with Obinna grew not in grand gestures or gilded promises, but in quiet, searing intensity. He let her see him stripped of his armor. The billionaire who conquered boardrooms now confessed doubts in hushed tones by moonlight. He let her photograph him in unguarded moments, half asleep on the sofa with papers scattered, laughing genuinely at a silly memory, or staring into the distance with longing no empire could soothe. Each photograph remained intact. Every image was a victory, a rebellion against the silence that had tried to erase him. For Chiamaka, the photos became more than art. They were her proof of existence, too. She began to surround herself with them, printing and pinning them across the walls of her apartment, until his face was everywhere she turned. The once bare plaster now glowed with his presence, like a gallery of permanence. For the first time in her life, she felt indispensable. Without her, he risked fading. With her, he endured. That realization fed something deep inside her, a hunger to matter, to be the one person who could hold him when even history let him slip away. And yet in the quiet hours, fear gnawed at her. What if she wasn't chosen, just convenient? What if she was merely standing where someone else had once stood, doomed to the same fate? Ifeoma's blurred paintings haunted her, the proof that another woman had once tried to immortalize him and failed. Those doubts sharpened the day Ifeoma returned. It happened in Obinna's penthouse, during an evening heavy with Lagos rain. The thunder echoed against the glass walls as Chiamaka arranged fresh prints on the table, images she had captured of Obinna that morning. Suddenly the elevator opened, and Ifeoma swept in without permission, wrapped in a gown the color of midnight, eyes blazing. "So this is what you've become," Ifeoma said, her gaze slicing through Chiamaka. "A girl drowning in photographs, clinging to a man who will consume you like he consumed me." Chiamaka straightened. "I'm not you." Ifeoma laughed, the sound bitter, brittle. "That's what I said, too. I thought I was special. I thought I could hold him. But look at me now." She gestured at herself, regal, but hollow. "Do you know what he leaves behind when he's done? Silence. Emptiness so vast, it swallows you whole." The words hit Chiamaka harder than she wanted to admit. She clenched her fists. "You failed because you saw him as a trophy. I see him as a man." Ifeoma's lips curved into a mocking smile. "Keep telling yourself that. But when the silence comes for you, don't say I didn't warn you." Obinna arrived then, shutting the confrontation down with a single look. Ifeoma left, but her shadow lingered. That night, as Chiamaka lay in his arms, her thoughts spun. She wanted to believe in her uniqueness, in the love that now pulsed between them, raw and undeniable. But doubt whispered, was she in love with Obinna, or with the mystery that wrapped itself around him? Her identity began to blur. The photographs felt like both proof and prison. Each time she looked at them, she asked herself, was she preserving him, or was he consuming her in return? Obinna sensed her unease. One evening, as they sat on his balcony overlooking the endless lights of Echo Atlantic, he reached for her hand. His voice was urgent, vulnerable. "Don't leave me, Chiamaka. Whatever happens, don't go. You're the only reason I still exist." She turned to him, searching his eyes. "Then tell me, why me? Why do my photos remain when all others vanish?" For a moment, silence swallowed them. He held her gaze, but no answer came. That silence hurt more than a lie. She nodded faintly, pulling her hand back. "You don't know, do you?" He closed his eyes, his face shadowed with shame. "I only know that I cannot lose you." The confession should have soothed her. Instead, it unsettled her. If even he didn't know why she was different, what guarantee did she have that she wouldn't end like the others, like Ifeoma, erased, broken, forgotten? The fear burrowed deeper until it followed her even in sleep. One night, she woke with a start. her room bathed in the faint hum of the city. Her eyes fell on the wall where her photographs of Obinna hung in neat rows, and then she froze. One of her favorite photos, an image of him sitting by the ocean, his silhouette framed by golden sunset, was burning. Slowly. There was no flame, no candle, no spark. But the edges curled, darkened, turning to ash, as if an invisible fire consumed it from within. Chiamaka's breath hitched. She stumbled out of bed, heart hammering, rushing to grab it. But by the time her fingers touched the frame, half the image was gone. Obinna's face had vanished into smoke. The storm that had been brewing around Obinna finally broke, and when it did, it came with the fury of men who had been waiting for his fall. One by one, rival billionaires launched strikes against him. Companies he once towered over, united in secret alliances, pouring millions into campaigns to dismantle his influence. Old friends became competitors overnight. Contracts that had taken years to build were suddenly dissolved with curt emails and unsigned agreements. The whispers of his vanishing became weapons. Board members who once praised him now used the strange erasures as proof that his empire was nothing more than smoke. "How can we trust a man who leaves no trace?" one rival sneered during a televised panel. "Maybe he was never truly here at all," another mocked, drawing laughter from the crowd. The media devoured the chaos. Headlines painted him as a ghost billionaire, a myth unraveling before the world's eyes. Talk shows replayed clips of him speaking at past events, blurry, distorted, proof of his supposed fraudulence. Social media hashtags trended. The vanishing tycoon, ghost of Lagos, did Obinna ever exist? Obinna, the man once feared, was now ridiculed. Chiamaka watched as the empire crumbled. The glass towers no longer shone with triumph. They felt like cages of reflection, mirroring her fear back at her. At every event, she saw the pity in people's eyes when they looked at her, the woman foolish enough to stand beside a man fading into irrelevance. Her family begged her to leave. "Don't tie your future to a man whose past doesn't even exist." Her friends distanced themselves, muttering that she had lost herself in someone else's shadow. Even fellow photographers mocked her, saying she was wasting her lens on a myth. But Chiamaka refused to abandon him. For her, Obinna was not a rumor, not a ghost. He was flesh and breath, laughter and silence. He was the man she had seen bleed loneliness, the man whose truth only her lens could capture. She became his fiercest defender, even when it cost her career, friendships, and the fragile ties with her family. At his side, she strategized. No longer was their battle about preserving his empire of wealth. It was about preserving his story. "We can fight them with the truth," she told him one night as they sat in his penthouse, the city below lit like fireflies. Not numbers, not contracts. With the only proof left, us. Obinna studied her, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, but alive with something else. Belief. Together they began piecing a narrative that was bigger than boardrooms and contracts. Chiamaka compiled her photographs, dozens of them, each one an undeniable frame of him existing where the world said he did not. She organized them into sequences, proof of his laughter, his struggle, his presence. Proof that he was real. The nights grew darker as their enemies tightened their grip. Meetings no longer took place in glass-walled offices, but in hidden lounges across Lagos, where smoke curled in dim air and whispered deals passed between trembling hands. Abandoned skyscrapers hosted secret gatherings, shadows leaning over tables where Obinna fought to salvage fragments of his influence. Chiamaka documented it all, her camera like a torch in the darkness. The images remained, sharp and unyielding, And yet with every victory they clawed back. The weight of their enemies pressed harder. The billionaire rivals wanted him erased not just from photographs, but from Lagos itself. Chiamaka began to feel the toll. Nights of exhaustion blurred into days of dread. She clung to her photos like lifelines, terrified that if she ever lost them, she would lose him entirely. Then came the night when silence grew too loud. It was a humid Friday, the sky thick with the promise of rain. Chiamaka waited in his penthouse, her camera resting on the table, expecting him to return from a late meeting. Hours passed. Midnight came. Her phone remained still, no call, no message. At first she thought it was another of his long nights, swallowed by endless negotiations. But when she searched her gallery, her blood ran cold. The photographs, every one of him, were still there, but something was wrong. In each image, his figure had begun to fade, growing fainter, almost translucent, as though erasure had reached even her lens. "No," she whispered, clutching the camera to her chest. She tried calling, no answer. She rushed to his usual haunts, lounges, skyscrapers, hidden offices. Each place offered only blank stares and empty air. No one had seen him. By dawn, a terrible truth sank in. Obinna was gone. No messages, no traces, no photographs, only silence. The silence of Obinna's disappearance did not linger like grief. It struck like a storm. Chiamaka refused to believe he was gone. Not after everything she had seen, not after the countless photographs that had anchored him into her reality. She clung to them now like relics, spreading them across her floor, her bed, her desk, searching for meaning in their still frames. Each one whispered fragments of his life, but none answered the question that burned in her chest. Where was he? Her search began with desperation. She retraced every place they had been together, the conference halls, the hidden lounges where deals were whispered, the skyscrapers where he paced like a restless god. She returned to the balcony, where he had once promised he could not exist without her. Every place felt emptier, colder, as though his absence had stolen the warmth from the air. Finally, cornered by frustration, she sought Ifeoma. They met in a cafe in Ikoyi, sunlight cutting sharp angles across marble floors. Ifeoma arrived draped in white silk, her beauty unshaken, her eyes sharp as ever. "You've lost him, haven't you?" Ifeoma said before Chiamaka even sat down. Chiamaka swallowed hard. "Where is he? What did you do?" A cruel smile tugged at Ifeoma's lips. "I told you, he doesn't vanish from your life. He vanishes from the world. This is what he is. You thought love could bind him, but love is just another kind of silence when it comes to him." Chiamaka's fists clenched under the table. She wanted to shout, to demand answers, but Ifeoma's calm certainty was more cutting than any insult. Still, Chiamaka refused defeat. She left the cafe with fire in her veins, clutching the photographs tighter than ever. If the world wanted to erase him, she would fight it with every image she had. That was when she noticed it, something hidden in the details. Zooming into one of the photos on her camera, she opened its metadata. Beneath the usual date and time, a strange series of numbers appeared, not random coordinates. Her heart leapt. Obinna had anticipated this. He had left her a trail. She raced across Lagos, following the hidden map in her photos. The first clue led her to Balogun Market, where fabric sellers shouted and colors burst like fireworks from every stall. She pushed through the crowd, arriving at a small kiosk where she found another clue. A symbol scratched faintly into the wall, the same as one he had once doodled on a napkin in her presence. The next coordinates pointed her to Banana Island, its manicured lawns and quiet streets a world apart from the chaos of Balogun. At the gates of a deserted villa, she found another symbol, faint but deliberate, etched into the metal. Her pulse raced. This wasn't coincidence. He had left these for her and only her. The final set of numbers guided her to Echo Hotel, the rooftop shimmering under city lights. The wind whipped her hair as she stood where they had once spoken of his empire. On the ground, barely visible, she found a slip of folded paper. No words, just a drawing of a tower. Its windows like hollow eyes. Her heart pounded as she studied it. She knew that shape. An abandoned high-rise on the edge of Victoria Island. A building long left unfinished, rumored to have been bought in secret years ago. She went there as dusk fell, the city glowing behind her, like a sea of restless fire. The tower loomed in silence, its glass broken in places, its concrete walls weathered by rain. She pushed the creaking doors open and stepped inside, her footsteps echoing through the hollow halls. Dust and shadows greeted her. Empty staircases stretched upward, their steps littered with fragments of forgotten ambition. She climbed, her breath shallow, clutching her camera like a weapon. On the top floor, the city spread beneath her like a galaxy of lights. The air was heavy, still. And then she heard it, soft, faint, a whisper carried by no wind. Chiamaka. Her heart froze. It was his voice. Obinna's, fragile, as though echoing not just from the room, but from another dimension altogether. The whisper was more fragile than breath, but it was enough to propel Chiamaka forward. She rushed through the half-lit corridor of the abandoned tower, her footsteps echoing against cracked concrete. Every sound seemed too loud, every shadow too alive. Her chest heaved with both dread and hope until she found herself at the farthest corner of the floor. There, slumped against a wall where the city's neon glow spilled faintly through shattered glass, sat Obinna. He was not the man she remembered. His body looked weaker, almost translucent, as though light was slipping through him. His shoulders, once broad with command, seemed diminished. His face carried exhaustion deeper than sleepless nights could carve. For a moment she feared if she blinked he would vanish altogether. "Obinna," she whispered, falling to her knees beside him. He turned his head slowly, his eyes dull yet still tethered to hers. "Chiamaka," he murmured, voice fragile. "You found me." She reached for his hand, but it felt colder than stone. Panic surged through her. "What's happening to you?" His lips trembled into a faint, sorrowful smile. "I can't resist it anymore. The force that erases me, it's stronger now. Every time I fight, I lose more of myself." His gaze dropped, as if ashamed. "I am disappearing." Tears stung her eyes, but she shook her head violently. "No, you're here. You're with me." "Only in fragments," he whispered, "and those fragments exist because of you. Your photos, they hold me when nothing else can. Without them, I am already gone." Her breath caught. The photos. They were more than memories. They were his lifeline. Frantically, she opened her camera bag and pulled out every print she had carried with her. Snapshots of his laughter, his quiet silences, the rare softness in his gaze. She taped them to the cracked walls of the tower one by one, until the room became a gallery of him. Obinna surrounded by himself, proof of his existence, staring back at him from every angle. When the last photo was in place, she stepped back, chest heaving. "Look," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're real. You're here. And as long as I breathe, you will not disappear." Obinna's eyes roamed the walls, drinking in the images. Slowly, something shifted in his expression. Relief mingled with pain. His outline, faint and fading, began to sharpen. His chest rose with deeper breaths, as though her photographs were feeding him life. Tears slid down Chiamaka's cheeks. She knelt beside him, cupping his face, desperate to keep him anchored. "I've been so afraid," she confessed, voice trembling. "Afraid that I was nothing, that my art meant nothing, that I was just another girl destined to be forgotten in this city. But you," she pressed her forehead to his, "you made me feel seen." His eyes glistened as his trembling hands touched her face. "And I have lived in fear of the opposite, that I would be seen by no one, that I would vanish even from history itself. But you," his voice cracked, raw with emotion, "you hold me." In that moment, their love became both salvation and surrender, a desperate, unspoken vow that even if the world refused him, she would not. That even if her life unraveled in the process, she would tether him to reality. The photos on the walls shimmered faintly in the dim light. But this time, they did not fade. Minute by minute, their permanence grew stronger, as though their love itself was rewriting the rules of his existence. For the first time, permanence seemed possible. They held each other, hearts pounding, breaths mingling. The tower was still empty, still broken, but it had become their sanctuary, a fortress of proof. Then Obinna pulled back slightly, his body trembling with both weakness and resolve. His eyes locked onto hers, burning with something more than desperation, something eternal. "Chiamaka," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Will you stay? Will you stay and be my anchor forever, even if it means losing yourself?" The room fell silent, the city lights beyond flickering like stars awaiting her answer. Chiamaka's answer came not in hesitation, but in the quiet certainty of her tears. She nodded, pressing her forehead to Obinna's trembling frame. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll stay. If it means losing myself, then let me be lost in you." The words sealed them. The fading edges of his figure grew sharper, his presence grounding as though her vow had stitched him back into reality. For the first time, Obinna felt solid in her arms, not a ghost, not a myth, but a man anchored by love. Days later, in the solitude of that abandoned tower, they held a private ceremony. No chandeliers, no billionaires in glittering gowns, no cameras flashing from media giants. It was only them. Two souls with scars, choosing to tether each other against the pull of oblivion. Obinna slid a ring onto her finger, not a diamond, but a band of simple gold. "Not to show the world," he murmured, "but to remind us that we remain." Chiamaka captured the moment with her camera, her hands trembling. When she glanced at the screen, her breath caught. The image did not vanish. His face remained, radiant and clear, his smile alive in the photograph as though time itself had bent in surrender. It was their miracle. Word of their bond spread slowly at first, whispered through Lagos's social circles, but soon it grew louder, impossible to ignore. Newspapers that had mocked Obinna now wrote of him as legend, calling Chiamaka the woman who made the vanishing billionaire visible. She became more than a photographer. She became a living myth, the proof of his existence. And with that, her name began to stand beside his, not as a shadow, but as an equal. Obinna, humbled by collapse, chose not to rebuild his empire with the arrogance of before. He invested instead in permanence, foundations for education, renewable projects for communities, art grants for young creators. His wealth no longer sought to dominate the skyline, but to leave roots in the ground. Lagos watched the transformation with awe. Once mocked as a ghost, he now walked openly beside Chiamaka. Every photo she took of him proof that he lived. For those who doubted, the walls of their new mansion silenced questions. It was not a mansion of cold glass like before, but one that breathed warmth. Its rooms overflowed with framed photographs, each one vibrant, each one intact. Their love, their laughter, their silences, all captured and preserved, filling the home with a permanence Obinna had never known. Ifeanyi, once fierce in her warnings and shadows, vanished quietly from the stage. No art shows, no whispers. Her defeat was not loud, but it was permanent. Chiamaka's presence had proven what Ifeanyi could not, that love, not ambition, was the anchor Obinna had needed all along. As years passed, their story settled into the rhythm of Lagos itself. Children on dusty streets whispered about the billionaire who once vanished. Couples toasted to the woman whose lens defied time. Their myth and reality blurred until it no longer mattered which was true, because the photographs on the walls spoke louder than stories ever could. One evening, as the harmattan winds swept through the city, Chiamaka stood in their gallery, tracing her fingers across a framed image of Obinna asleep by the window, bathed in golden light. Her chest swelled with gratitude, her heart whispering what words could not. Sometimes love itself is the only proof we ever exist. And just as peace seemed to settle, life nudged her with a new ripple. She was closing her studio one evening when a man approached. His face was tense, his eyes shadowed by desperation. "You're Chiamaka Ifeanyi, aren't you?" he asked, his voice urgent. "Yes," she replied cautiously, studying him. He held out a small envelope. "I need you to take my photograph." She frowned. "There are many photographers in Lagos. Why me?" His hands shook as he opened the envelope, revealing a single fading picture. The edges blurred, the figure dissolving like smoke. "Because," he said hoarsely, "my images disappear too." The air stilled. Chiamaka clutched her camera, her heart quickening with both dread and inevitability. Perhaps Obinna was not the only one. Perhaps her story was just the beginning. What would you do if every photograph you took began to vanish? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.